Anyway, let me introduce you guys to John. John, I'm always going to screw up the pronunciation on your last name, though.
Yarema.
There we go. John Yarema, talking to us from Michigan. What town in Michigan?
Metamora. We're like in it's like horse country here. Matter of fact.
It's like right about here?
It's yeah, it's up in the little more, like in the thumb a little bit.
A little towards Bad Axe?
Yeah, see, I can show you. This is our yard here. This is like what our yard looks like.
Dang!
Wow. Those guys
that's
out there?
Like real farmland. That's so cool.
Yeah. And then so we're like spoiled.
It looks like very heavy duty COVID country.
It could be, but we don't know about. We heard it. That's all a hoax. That's a fake news.
Yeah,
fake news.
Anyways.
Our neighbor just sued Whitmer. Our neighbor's a congressman, U.S. congressman. He just sued Whitmer. My wife is like on the moon right now about it. She's never going to talk to him again. You know, he's our U.S. congressman. Anyway, I don't mean to get into that. Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. So anyway, right next to you there, at least on my screen, is Christy Williamson talking to you from Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And next to Christy is Mark Santrach talking to you from Minneapolis.
Got it.
And those two, so Mark is an architect with Hart Howardson.
Okay.
Typically out of New York, but for the last couple of months out of Minnesota. And Christy is self-employed with Building Science Fight Club, the founder, chairman, and CEO.
Nice.
Yeah, right. Somebody asked me, who was it? Back when we still did conferences and stuff, somebody did I was going to do a speaking engagement at it was something or other. And the people who were going to pay me, the manufacturer, put together like a little something. And they didn't ask me, but they just identified me as the president, but it's a new, going into business for yourself, it's a new thing. So it just seems sort of, I don't know, a little lofty to call yourself the president of a company of one person. I mean, I'm also the plumber, the secretary, the whatever.
All of that. Anyway, so everybody knows me, Foster. So this podcast is ultimately for the Institute of Classical Architecture and Art. So everybody should be recording.
Oh, I don't think
I got to double check
I haven't gotten the permission yet.
Oh, no? Let's see. What do I got to do?
Oh, please request permission, it says.
Sorry. Allow record. That's you, Mark. Christy, allow record. John, allow record. And then I think on the bottom, sort of in the middle of your screen there, John, there should be something to allow you to record.
Yeah, it says pause or stop recording. So I think if it's saying stop recording, it must be recording.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look up in the top left, you'll see like a red blinking light with, it should say recording next to it.
Yeah, but I said that before I started recording. But anyway. Probably working.
I sent everybody some instructions on what to do after the podcast, after we're done talking. And it's basically like you got to take the file and allow it to do whatever the hell electronic crap does to dump it onto your own computer. And probably tomorrow morning, because sometimes it takes a long time, you drop it in that updated Dropbox I sent. And Mark, I know you have that updated Dropbox. So.
Yep.
And you're supposed to rename the file to Building Science, your initials.
Oh, wait, we have to rename it?
You're supposed to. Yeah. I think that was step 16 in the instructions.
Oh, whoops. Well, they seem to have figured it out without that. So anyway.
Tomorrow. We don't have to do that till tomorrow.
That's right.
Correct. It seems to take them certainly more than a couple of days to do the editing and whatever they do. And I don't know whenever they're going to publish it, but when they do, I'll let everybody know.
Well, you gentlemen definitely have to give your names because you're just indistinguishable when you speak. I'm a lady, so they can tell. I don't need to do I don't need to wear a name tag, audio name tag.
Yeah. I may or may not put this on my website, the video recording. If I just choose to do that, I'll let everybody know. And then if you don't want me to, no big deal. I won't do it. But anyway, That's
Yeah,
it.
you should ask us again after we're
I was just
finished.
say when we bomb.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
No. So anyway, so I invited John to speak tonight because he is in addition to a whole bunch of other things, a wood flooring expert, and we're supposed to talk about cool, sciencey, technical things on this podcast. And I don't know if John knows any technical stuff, but he's pretty cool. So he hit like 1 out of 2.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to call somebody on the technical. Phone a friend.
So
Hang on, I'll be right back. I got to get a drink. I got to get a coffee. I'll be right back. Oh, the answer to your question. Just
yeah.
to
So
surmise. Right.
I think my first question, John, would be to kick things off. Like, what's there possibly to worry about technically with a wood floor?
Moisture.
What?
Always moisture.
Moisture.
Yeah, moisture is the biggest culprit. It's the only. It really is. Honestly, it's the only thing.
Fire, I guess, but
Fire, yeah.
that's kind of a bigger deal. Like, you kind of know.
Earthquake, right?
Wait
Earthquake.
a minute. What about color staining then too? Come on.
Yeah, there you go. Fire. That's where fire comes from, right? Yes, yes. We
Yeah.
burned up plenty of dumpsters. Yeah, you know it's so funny when somebody told me, "Oh, you got to watch the stain rags. They're not, they can spontaneously combust." I said, "Yeah, right. Okay, sure, right. That's impossible. How do you make fire from nowhere?" This is, 30 years ago. You're like, "This is impossible." Obviously, it's not impossible, and I've seen it. And we've had,
Really?
yeah, oh yeah. If you
Oh,
take
yeah.
if you took a Duracell stain rag or even Minwax from the store, wad it up, put it in your garbage can, I bet you I would say 8 out of 10 times it would start a fire. You can start a fire
No
on.
kidding.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So this is probably unrelated, but I don't know. We've got somebody who knows lots of chemistry here. I was watching with my husband the series on Netflix, Waco, and anyway, they were talking about tear gas essentially just combusting,
Yes.
or it's just very flammable. I don't know what the difference is. Is it
Right.
something similar, or am I totally just thinking
No,
fire?
I think it's different. I would say that would be a vapor, and this is actually just being where it's not allowed to dry, and it actually. I don't know the science. I just know the scientific part where it bursts into flames. But we
Want me
actually.
to fill
Yeah,
you?
go
I
ahead.
could fill you in if you want on that part.
And
Yeah,
like spray
please.
foam is like that too, right? Totally different. It can also
Different.
blow up.
Well, it's sort of different, sort of not. So what happens with these of some oils, not all oils, is they oxidize. In other words, they react with oxygen in the air, like linseed oil, right, John? That
Right.
oxidizes. That's how it
Yes.
cures.
Yes.
It oxidizes. Well, when you keep it too concentrated, in other words, the rag is all together and it's surrounded by a bunch of garbage in a trash can, it still can get oxygen to it. So you get this heat of chemical reaction when the oxygen reacts with the oil, but the heat can't leave then, and you got a lot of those reactions going on in a very tight space, and eventually it reaches the flame temperature for the cotton, typically in the rag, and the rest is history. It bursts into flames. Now, that's kind of the same thing as spray foam, because it's not technically oxidation, but it is there's a chemical reaction, part A, part B, with spray foam. It gives off
And if
heat.
you compress it too much, right?
Well, it's insulation. It's insulating itself, and then it just gets so goddamn hot in the middle that it burns itself, basically.
Wow.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that's why the closed cell stuff you can only spray it in 2-inch passes. If you get thicker than that, the open cell is different, but the closed cell stuff only because it's denser. The 2-inch passes you max out, and otherwise you blow things up. It's not good.
Wow.
That's why you don't mess around. People are like, what are your recommendations with spray foam if you want to use it? I'm like, you got to hire someone who really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Exactly.
You start a fire.
It's two lines I always use with closed cell spray foam. They have to be knowledgeable and experienced. You need both of them.
Three. I have enough insured.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so we have had a few fires. Believe it or not, when we first started having fires in our dumpsters, we thought some kids are lighting our dumpsters on fire. You're thinking, well, yeah, the guys are. And we actually burned up a trailer one time on a job site. Again, it's when we used to run a lot of guys, and so you didn't have control over everyone. And they're like, well, it's snowing outside. It's a snowstorm. So they throw the rags in and at the time it was a Cintico product. It was a phenolic resin, but it's an oil product. And they threw it in the dumpster. And of course, the next day there was just an axle. It was one of those drag dump, the trailer dumpsters. There's like 2 axles and the 2 tires are burned off. And we're like, yeah, I don't know what happened there. And then the other one we had this one was probably about 20 years ago. We had the guys took the rags and put them in a bucket, and they put the bucket in the bathroom. And this is probably a $7 million house. And yeah, it which is, I don't know, somebody was looking out for us because it should have been on CNN. But the bucket started on fire in the bathroom. He soldered, I don't know if that's a word, unsoldered the stub for the toilet. It got so hot and flooded it and put out the fire.
Huh.
So it was really a $80,000 damage job. We replaced all our wood because it was flooded, but it could have been a $7 million burn down. And yeah.
Wow.
And what I also know now about insurance is, so the insurance will pay for everything but the floor. So we ended up having to redo the floor, obviously, because they don't want you burning up your own floor and collecting on it. So we had to replace that floor.
Mhm.
But again, it was one of those things. Those guys don't work for us anymore, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
That had gone the other way. I might be talking to Sprig tonight.
Yeah. He went out of business back in, yeah. No, it's it happens a lot. And a lot of gym guys too, where they'll buff and coat a floor. They get in there quick. They'll and I know a lot of gym guys, they'll have fires all the time because you let coat a poly, you get in there quick the next day, you buff it up, you vacuum it up, and that still has that solvent in the bag, and their vacuums will start on fire, right? Because you got all that air pounding
Gym,
through there.
like gymnasium?
Yes, like gym
Huh.
floor guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And just
I
those
had
guys
a
are
carpeted gym in high school. It's my 20-year high school reunion that I'm missing right now. It was carpeted, I know. Well, they
Wow.
got more money and they have a proper floor now. But
wow.
I was sort of disappointed they got rid of it because it was, I don't know, character building, right? Rug burns,
Yeah.
volleyball and stuff.
Was it green stuff, like the greens indoor outdoor, or what was it?
No, it was just like cheap, crappy carpet. Our school was not very good at athletics. Also, we're Canadian, so we kind of, if it doesn't happen on ice, we're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, got it.
Kids will figure it out. But wow, yeah, the sheen on a gymnasium floor. How is that different than just regular?
I think what it is those guys push the envelope a little bit on coating, and so they're kind of hot coating a little. They're coating quicker than you should normally coat. So I think some of the solvents aren't out of the finish. So I think they're just getting a little hotter. There's just a little more chemical in the bags. And if you look at the bags, they'll use these. There's usually a bag on, or a lot of them. The backpack bags are basically a bag, and then you're forcing all this air through that bag. So you're almost trying to start a fire. It's like a big bellow.
Yeah.
So you get all those things going on, but yeah, it happens all the time. So,
So John, my first really big experience with a wood floor was with a gymnasium. School gymnasium. I was like a 26-year-old superintendent of construction, and we had to put in a enormous maple floor, and I didn't know anything from anything basically, and I found it fascinating to watch these guys work, ignoring they shimmed the whole thing and leveled, and had these like 12-foot steel pipes they rolled around to find the low spots, and that was all pretty cool to watch. But then they actually dropped I don't know if they were 1/8 inch, but they were certainly 16th inch washers, the size of like a half a dollar, every 32 inches. Like, there'd be a washer every couple of feet down the entire length of the gymnasium, and then left to right, room for expansion.
right.
And then at the perimeter, there was this enormous L-shaped, what do you call it?
Like a molding,
molding that had like at least 3 inches of space for this floor to move around.
Yep.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, but I couldn't help but think like, well, does everything move? Does the shims and everything go with the floor? Like, how the hell, like, I can understand the one piece moving itself, but that piece is nailed to another piece, which is, nailed to something else. And how does it all move together and not pull itself apart?
Well, I don't think it's the pulling itself apart. It's the expansion that they're worried about. And if you look at a gym floor, there's always gaps in a gym floor, and they want those gaps. A lot of guys will actually lay wire in those slots too, because it's easier to get out than picking up all the washers. So they'll lay a line of wire down a row, and then they can just pull the piece of wire out and get rid of it. But you're right. I mean, you start to think about the way wood grows per every, let's say every 1 degree of moisture content increase, right? So there's factors for that. There's a stability coefficient, and different woods are different. But I mean, when you start doing the math and you say, hey, over that gym you have 80 feet of, and at one point moisture, if the moisture increases by 1% as far as the moisture in the wood, that board's going to grow 1/100th of an inch, and which 1/100th of an inch, but you have 900 boards, and you start to get 9 inches, right? And it grows real fast. And anytime, if you probably saw it too, anytime you see damage on a gym floor, like, hey, one of the toilets stuffed up in the locker room and it rolled into the gym and nobody knew, and it kept running, and then the floor looks like a wave, where
Yeah.
the floor will actually come, the hardwood will actually swell and come off the floor. I've seen it up to like 4 feet.
Oh yeah.
Or an old gym that there was one in Detroit that they stopped using, and then the hole in the ceiling, and then you go in there and you could almost skateboard on the floors. They're so
So assuming you don't have a plumbing leak or a problem of outside water getting in, like let's take that off the table.
Yes.
How many do you get real moisture problems with, say, a gymnasium floor from I guess there are 2 things that I can think of, and I'm wondering if you can comment on them and let me know if there's more. You can get moisture exposure from poor mechanical system design somehow, theoretically, or from moisture content in the initial installation. So the wood starts out wet, and then I imagine there's tons of stuff that you can screw up, or someone can screw up with that. But then does the mechanical, which I'd like you to talk about, but does the environment that you're keeping the gym in matter? What if everybody goes home and they turn off the AC for a while? Does that matter?
Yes, which they do. I mean, they always do. I mean, so you think about a lot of these schools are, they're in a financial crisis, so they don't run. And I don't even remember having air conditioning in the schools when we were kids. I don't know. Did they even have it? They didn't even have it, I don't think. I don't believe they did.
Not in Michigan where you live. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, yeah, we didn't have it. So I would say, up in Minnesota. I have a friend in Minnesota. Do you know the hardwood floor guys in Minnesota at all, Mark?
I don't know. No.
There's Steve Belrose is a good friend of mine, very knowledgeable guy, and he's right in Minneapolis there. So anyway, all right. So yeah, I would say that's it's always the moisture content. Doesn't have to be rain or water damage, and it's with every floor. And what you see in a gym is just it's basically a big wood floor in even a townhouse in New York. So you're blasting through summer schedule, right? And the house doesn't have any kind of acclimation, any kind of moisture control, any kind of relative humidity is through the roof. Go, right? You got to be done. And we run into that quite often, actually. So I think so it doesn't even have to
that
be.
It can be that too, even just
it's almost always that. I mean, usually it's not a problem with it. It's not that hard to dry the wood out, and it's not that hard to, I mean, it's funny. It's you always think about, when we used to timber frame, we would use, you'd use green wood, and you'd think, oh my gosh, you got to send it away to be processed to have it, to be able to use it to build with. And it obviously, if you can send it away and you can get it dried and it can be more prepared for that, but it really doesn't take a lot to check a wood floor. We stick it with a meter. So it comes in the house, and we want to be between 6 and 8%, let's say. So we stick it with a meter. Yep, it's in between that range. Most any decent hardwood floor company is going to stick the wood before they put it down, just because if you don't, the opportunity for a disaster is enormous. But what we run into is these with summer schedule in New York is often, I don't want to say often, but you're always having to monitor the site conditions. Bring it in,
Yeah.
we want to acclimate it. Well, we don't want to acclimate. So there's an acclimation. Again, I guess I'm going too far. We can talk about acclimation in a minute because acclimation is very important. The problem with acclimation is, what are we acclimating to? So if you have a home and you live in your home and you've been in that home for a few years and say, hey, we're going to put a wood floor in our bedroom. Okay, well, let's bring the wood and let it acclimate because the house is kind of it's kind of found its
Equilibrium
place.
already. Yeah.
Yes. So, but if we say, hey, we've got this wood and we make sure the wood is 6% or 7%, and we just had something happen recently that was we dried it to try to dry it even drier because we took it down to 5 to 6% because we wanted it to perform in the wintertime because we know in a high rise there's no moisture. They won't let you put humidity. I mean, there's not a lot of humidity. It's a little bit because of art and things like that. But we just didn't want it to dry out. And what we ended up, we went through a summer season with no acclimation and no very, very high relative humidity, and we got bit by it. So
What did you have to do as a result? Did you have to start
still
over or like?
No, it's still kind of ongoing. It's still, well, we're still in the middle of it. I don't know yet. But
You didn't just
again,
take the circular saw and run it down the middle of the floor?
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, again, it's just that it's just one of the things we have to worry about, and we're usually very, very. But yeah, I mean, the site conditions, whether you bring the floor in at proper relative not relative moisture content, it doesn't matter if it's on site for too long. So
John, can I ask you this? Like,
yeah,
I believe it's critically important for the designers, the contractor, and then whoever the installer is to really articulate to everybody, including the end user, like, look, this is a natural material that changes size with changes in relative humidity, and relative humidity changes like every day.
right.
So you have to expect some movement, and there's going to be cracks on some days, and it may actually lift off the subfloor a tiny little bit once in a while.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm still waiting to meet a client who says like, oh, okay, thanks for telling me, like, you'll never hear from me again.
Well, they hear you when you say it in the beginning, and then I think down at the end when they see the cracks, they're like, wait a minute, is this what you meant? Right? It's hard to articulate that. But I would say we do a very good job of mitigating it up front. Oops, sorry, that was me, guys. Sorry. I think we do a pretty good job of trying to mitigate it up front and making sure the moisture content is. Well, a lot of times we'll when we bring our hardwood flooring in, we'll bag it. We'll actually put it in we'll wrap it because we just don't want those odd site conditions, those extreme site conditions when there's no relative humidity control or very little. We just don't want those influencing the product. So you really want the product in New York. You want it going in between 5 and 8%.
People really, I think it just doesn't occur to them how wet construction sites are and our building materials are. Like when you're mudding drywall, painting with latex paint, like there's concrete, it's really wet, those buildings are wet.
A really crazy one. I was involved with a job in Connecticut, big house, under construction for a good long time, like one of these 20,000 square footers. Beautiful, beautiful, really spectacular house. And they had all the mechanical systems on during the construction and the end of construction, but they could not control the relative humidity no matter how hard they tried, and they started having trouble with the new wood flooring. And what they found was there was an enormous amount of hot, humid air dropping down the 8 chimneys and through the fireboxes into the house, and it was just overloading every system they had. As simple as that. And I don't know. I honestly, I don't. I think they had dampers closed and this and that, but they're not. They're not airtight, and it just.
So what they do? Just pressurize the house a little bit, and.
No, they basically just suffered through it, and when it was all done and everything was closed up and all the systems were running. Because the other thing that happens during construction is, guys are walking in and out of doors like crazy.
Yeah.
So as much as I want to blame it all on the fireplaces, like there's always like something going on, doors open, this and that. But finally, when it was all closed up and said and done, they brought it at least into enough control that the homeowner stopped complaining bitterly, So, but
And it's funny. You think about that too, where we'll see reactions in the materials that you will not see the second year. For example, you have people, if it's wintertime, right, and you're running heat, there's the house isn't really sealed up 100%. Not only that, you have contractors walking in the door, out the door, in the door, out the door. And I bet you if you looked at their fuel bill, it'd probably be 5 times what it's going to be once it's under service, right, once you're living in the home. So you think about all that air that goes through that hot air that goes through that house and how that's going to dry out the floors and how that's going to affect. But yeah, we always worry about the wood comes in summer schedule because that's when they can do a lot of these projects in New York. You bring the wood in and you're trying to acclimate it. And then let's say it's going over radiant heat. So not only is it coming in the summer, they want you to install it in the summer and they want the wood there, obviously, to keep things moving. But you almost don't want to deliver it until you're ready to put it in. Or what we'll do a lot of times is we'll bring the wood in and we'll cover it with plastic and then we'll put a dehumidifier underneath the plastic. But we just ran into one recently where they said, we're going to work on the dehumidification, and this job went fine. But they said we were going to work on dehumidification, and they put air conditioners in there. Well, as soon as it hit temperature, the air conditioner, you hit 70, 68 degrees, and everybody's during the day, everyone's walking in and out, and the air conditioners are going all that, but they would shut off at night. So then,
it's people have trouble with that where they don't realize that your air conditioner is only dehumidifying when it's on.
Right.
It's not on. It's not dehumidifying.
That's right. Yeah, you could. And during the day, you could hang beef in there, but at night, it would shut right off. So So anyway, so that's an issue. But it's almost, I would say, any problem we've ever had has been moisture.
I have a question about this though. Okay, so moisture, I get it. That screws stuff up. We know that. Do you have to worry you working in New York City on some apartment buildings, but I suppose on some of these beast-like houses, big ones like this, do you have to worry about loading? Like before, or maybe it's sort of a moot point because by the time people are thinking about putting flooring in, the roof's already on, the heavy things are already in the building.
Right.
But do you have to worry? Has that ever happened, or is it mostly kind of problem that takes care of itself?
No, are you talking about like
gravity load?
Yeah, like the things move when you have like all the drywall is now on a building or like been your the stuff that goes on a complicated building is already there. So framing changes, for example.
So it's physically going to move the structure a little bit, and when
it's built, right? Before, so things
happens to tile all the time. That's for sure.
Right.
Oh, really? With tile, you got to pay attention to that with tile.
Breaks constantly because of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. I know. I've worked on some big apartment projects, and I hear the contractors talking about sequencing stuff with respect to loading, but I very rarely have to pay attention to it. Sometimes with below grade waterproofing, sometimes because it was related to dewatering systems and stuff like that. But mostly that's their problem. So yeah, tile and I guess wood maybe
Wood probably not so much because we have seams between each piece that it may be a hairline gap. With tile, you don't get any.
Yeah, it's not forgiving.
Yep, it's not forgiving at all.
So John, you did a job.
Yep.
I think it was out in Wisconsin. And it was the Minwax floor, as I recall.
Oh, SC Johnson Wax in Racine, Wisconsin. Yeah.
So I don't know if the rest of you have seen this, but let me describe it. It is a map of South America with the flight line of a flight from somewhere in North America, and it might have been North America too. I don't recall.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
But it is a beautiful, colored map, so you can see the difference between the mountains and the the tundra and the forest, and like an incredibly detailed wooden map of South America that was probably like 60 feet by 50 feet or something, like huge. On
Yeah,
this,
it's like 110. It's like
oh,
110. Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. There's
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know, it must have been at least like 40, 50 different varieties of wood. So how the heck, how worried were you about that thing
It's
moving
all like
around?
inlaid and
Yeah, well, this one is end grain, so it's end grain blocks. So we use 20,000
Ah,
end grain blocks.
what's what's end grain blocks?
End grain. So imagine you take your wood planking on your floor and turn it upright. So
Okay.
when you look down, so you imagine the tree growing
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
up and down. You'd be looking at the cutoff of the
Yeah,
tree.
we draw that on our architectural drawings
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
The section cut.
The section cut. Yeah, so it's the section cut. So you imagine the section cut. So this one happened to be end grain blocks, and we made a map out of it. And for the S.C. Johnson, the family. So it's in the center of the Frank Lloyd Wright complex in Racine, Wisconsin. So it's S.C. Johnson wax. And this was, we did a bronze journey line of the travels for, this is how the S.C. Johnson family, or S.C. Johnson, it was like Horace Johnson or Sam, one of the Johnsons, got in with this little plane, some Sikorsky's plane, and flew down to South America to find the sustainable carnauba wax supply. So this is kind of commemorating that journey, and yeah, it was very interesting. And end grain moves twice as much as regular flooring, because if you imagine, and even timber framing, it's why it works, why you can timber frame with green lumber. When you cut a 20-foot section, it's 20-foot timber, from green to dry, it might shrink a quarter inch. So if you did
in length.
in length, yeah. So length doesn't change.
Yeah.
So when you think about, but wood moves tangentially and radially. So when you when you do end grain, it doesn't get any taller. Whereas if you have a plank, there's some movement that's making the wood taller and shorter that you're in, especially with rift and quartered sawn. But because it's more stable, but it actually moves up and down a little bit. But you don't get that movement. So you have twice the amount of worry when you do an end grain floor. And
Wow.
it was, and we had installed some of that end grain on plywood panels and cut the panels to shape. And one day we laid out in the shop next to us with no humidity control. We came in the next day, and it looked like one of those gyms we're talking about. And of course,
Wow.
we were and then by turning the heat on, the one thing good about end grain material is you can dry it out quick. You can put moisture into it quick. It's a very rapid process of drying end grain.
So what
Now-
was the process with that project? That's so cool. But like, somebody gets an idea. I want a cool floor like this.
Yes.
Somebody draws it, designs it. Somebody has to build it. Are these different people? Are they the same people? How do you even? This world has got to be small. The people who know how to do this.
This was well, for us, we're third or fourth down the list. This is a Norman Foster project. And they imagined this map. And then they brought on a designer, Ralph Applebaum, I think they did the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and they do these really beautiful. I mean, so they were brought on, and so we worked. Then they say, hey, we have to find somebody who can do this. And a lot of times those really odd ones come to us. So they go through a process of trying to find someone, and we come up, because we're always trying to do, I don't know, we don't run away. Most people should run away if I'm sure they're accountants, they're attorneys, run away. And I said, what's that? I run towards the trouble.
Foster gives me that advice all the time, because I'm sort of new in my firm, in my own business. And he's like, look, just say yes. Always say it. Take the money. You'll figure it out. I swear. I'm blowing your cover, Foster.
All right.
I think that's a great idea. I had somebody come to me. They said, hey, we want another floor guy. And he said, man, the guy was crazy. He wanted to put a dance floor over a swimming pool. And I said, really? And I got excited, because I thought, I'm thinking, in your head, you're thinking,
how could
Well,
I make it work?
That's not
Yeah.
nothing, right? And even the numbers, right? Even the numbers, because he immediately shied away from it because he just didn't understand it. Where I would run towards that, and somebody who wants to do something so interesting, obviously know that it's going to be expensive. So I would rather run to those projects
Yeah.
that like most people don't want to do or can't do or don't even want to do. Otherwise you're in a crowded boat all the time. So we're always trying to, I like, and that's not why I do it. I do it because I like the challenge of it. Once I know how to do something, I always,
It's also, it's interesting to work with people who, in situations where the ordinary constraints that you're used to dealing with don't apply. So I'm sure this is probably an example of that. There's probably 1,000 little examples in that one project. Foster and I were on I had a client friend, so I didn't take the job, but I referred Foster to it. And the request was, I want to build this particular structure and I want it to last forever. And I was like, well, what do you mean forever? Like, I don't know, a couple hundred years? And the guy was like, no, like the pyramids forever, like forever, maintenance free forever. And yeah, it was exactly what you're describing. This was a guy who was like, tell me what's involved. What does it take? And it was interesting to think about the project in that light. Like, what do you do when the ordinary constraints don't apply? Like now I can make my foundation system whatever I want. Anyway. He abandoned, by the way, the end of the story is that
Forever wasn't as long as everybody thinks it is.
I came in after I talked to all the best people I knew at this stuff. It was really cool. And I went in and gave this was, for me, he was a friend, gave a presentation to him, and it involved a gold roof. And because gold doesn't react with anything, right? Anyway, so that was really funny to go in. I'm proposing, like as a serious proposal for something. Have you thought of gold? Anyway, like there's some projects like that though. You're hand cutting like an enormous, what have you said, 110 foot map.
Well, John, let me ask you this. I mean, this comes up for me regularly. People on projects will say like, I don't want my floor to move. I don't want to see a gap. And I always tell them, that's fine. You can achieve that if you're willing to pay for it. Because you can epoxy inject wood. You know, you can epoxy.
Will that make it not move?
Yeah, you just epoxy impregnate the wood. It's crazy expensive, and you can get it in purple and green and whatever color you want too. But you know, it's not the same material anymore. It looks a little bit different, and you know, blah blah blah. But
at that point, do you just pick plastic?
Yeah, you'd be better off just painting the floor. That's usually what I tell them. Just paint it, and you'll be done.
So there's actually two things. So it's one. I'm going to jump back to the forever roof. It's funny when we just had our roof done, and the guy's like, "Do you want the 25-year or the forever roof?" He didn't say forever, but in my head, and he's like, "Well, how old are you?" I'm like, "Wait a minute, is this my last?"
my last roof.
Oh yeah.
Your own mortality. I did.
15-year roof.
I did in this meeting. So it was with my friend, but he had some of his business associates in it with him. I told him that I'd guarantee the roof for 500 years.
Right.
And they did not think that was funny. I was like, "Oh, you know," I thought I was making a joke. I thought I was making a funny joke, but they were like, they did not.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, really?
Oh.
Come on, guys."
I like that. See, I think that's funny. Yeah. So there's ways. So there's an impregnation. And I'm trying to think of the company that does it, but they actually put it in a vat through vacuum, and they impregnate the way. They use it a lot for restaurants because you never have to finish it again. They inject it, but I heard who have been to that factory. I don't know if it's an Armstrong factory or something, but it basically impregnates the wood. You know, there's another thing and we've been playing with a little bit, and it seems to be very is thermal treating, where people will thermal treat ash, let's say, and so you'll put it in an oven and you bake it to 500 degrees, and it's in a vacuum, so they'll rob it of any oxygen so it can't combust, but the cells of the wood collapse. Yeah. So the wood then is almost inert.
Charcoal.
I mean,
charcoal.
You make so and it turns it a really beautiful brown color. It's very brittle, and I had some here. Somebody had sent it to me, and they said, well, this is you can put it outdoors. You can do anything with it. It won't rot. It won't move. And I put it in a puddle just to see, like, of course it's going to move because it's wood. But it actually it cupped a tiny bit in a puddle where overnight I took it out and it flattened right out again. So I don't know why. So there's some, but very little movement in a thermally treated material.
I'm gonna add on to that. That process also makes it hydrophobic. It wood is very hydrophilic. It really sucks up a lot of moisture on every on the surface, on the interior, on everything.
Right.
That that heating process also makes it hydrophobic. But just to give you some idea, by the way, if you take your teacup and put put it under a candle right on the spout, the water pours out a lot better because all that black sooty carbon is hydrophobic.
So, is that related to the talk about the Japanese charred wood? I've never worked on that.
Wood, yeah, I can't remember. Yes. Shogiban. Same stuff. Same thing. Same.
It's his son. Yeah. So I think that, but is there a process? It's funny. We were just messing around with that yesterday. Actually, we were burning. You hit it with an axe. So it's funny. You have to kind of preheat the wood a little bit. The way they used to do it is they'd build a frame. They basically build a triangle and they'd start a fire in it and they'd let it. But we were doing some ironworking. Saturday, and we had a oxyacetylene torch, very hot and we hit the wood and it just basically evaporated the top layer of the wood. It just completely blew it off there. And so you have to kind of slowly, because we'll use rosebuds a lot of times, just the roasting rosebuds, and you just have to kind of move it, but don't stay too long. Move, but anyway, that's the process, preserving like a cedar, Japanese cedar.
Same thing. Yep.
So,
do people do anything like that on flooring?
No.
Yeah, I would think that would not be appealing, but who knows? Whatever.
Well, I mean, it just wouldn't be durable in any way. I mean, it's a very tricky problem. I mean, so when you do it, you can scratch away the burnt section. I've seen people where they've burnt it and then wire brushed it, but then I don't know. It's a brown color. It's not a black color. But that beautiful gatoring from the charred look is what everybody really likes. So you're able to, when you first do it, you can basically break it off. You can break off the little charred pieces. Once you impregnate it with finish, it's very porous at that time, but you can impregnate it with even oils, or sealers, and it's actually surprisingly durable. I don't believe you could ever walk on it because I don't think you could impregnate it with that. You'd be basically you'd have to be the acrylic impregnation. We were talking about it a little while ago. You'd have to bring in I've never seen it on the floor. I don't believe it could ever be a floor.
So John, we talked a lot about the different types of treatments that you can do to make sure that wood that doesn't lose its shape or size. But are there any patterns that you can use, like parquets, or maybe regulating the size of each board that help control the expansion? Yep.
Because you imagine wood doesn't get longer, wood only gets wider. So anytime if you have two pieces that touch perpendicular, you only have the movement of this board, in its width. So if only half of the boards in your floor are running, east-west and the other are running north-south, you have half the amount of movement in that floor just by that.
Is that like the Versailles? What about Versailles pattern? Is that like, is Versailles pattern because of that, or is it because it just looks beautiful?
I think it's just beautiful. Yeah, I think and I always wonder. I think it was. It's one of those things that people. It's funny. I don't know if they used it. Probably it's just for the strict ornamental portion. I don't know if there's any purpose maybe to use smaller boards, maybe for something finer. I don't know the reason they did it. It's funny, we see a lot of Versailles parquet. It's just still no matter what, people still are drawn to it. We have this place and we want it to be Frank Lloyd Wright style, and we really like this floor. You're like, well, okay, that's not.
Well, you know what though? It's your house. Your house is your palace.
Right.
You get to do what you want because you're a grown up.
Yeah, it's a beautiful floor, and it has a lot of nostalgia to it. It's just a very interesting floor. And it just feels different every time you walk around it. The way the wood, even in a herringbone, and a herringbone would be the same thing. You have half the amount of movement because you're only half the boards are running north south. Yeah, it's a great pattern, and as you walk around them, you'll see that where if you have a herringbone, you see every other row has a different shade to it, right? You see dark light, walk around the other side, and then they switch, right, depending on the light in your view of the boards. And so it's just got a lot of character with the same color wood, which gives it a really nice. It's like a holographic effect, the way the wood reflects the light with the grain or against the grain, it changes. So that's how you get that dark light. But yeah, that's absolutely good question. And then the narrower the boards, again, so if you have 5 2-inch boards, you have what is that 6 joints that can expand and contract. So let's say 1 foot of width of oak is going to move with every 1 degree change or in moisture content is going to move. It's an amount. Oh, sorry, where's that at? I don't know where that's at. So hang on, let me shut that off.
You could have left that on and just convinced us that was
damn ducks again. Yeah, so so a board, so you imagine, say a 12-inch wide board, let's say it's going to shrink 1/8 of an inch. And so if you said, well, it's going to shrink 1/8 of an inch, if you were to divide that by 6, that's how much it's going to shrink in between 2-inch boards. So it's almost goes from, oh my gosh, look at this crazy gap to, well, it's not that bad, right? So you're, it's almost not even noticeable. So that's a good reason to use narrower material.
Also just so less movement, but also a pattern conceals defects in almost anything.
Right. It just is one of those things that right now, and we used to do predominantly, I would say 80% of our jobs were pattern floors. Right now, we're not doing a lot of pattern floors because it's just not in fashion at the moment. We'll do some things that are patterned, but they're odd in the way that they're patterned. But most everything right now is wide plank, large plank, 14-inch plank, 16-inch plank. So we have some really large plank. That's kind of the style right now, these giant monolithic planks.
Well, so John, along those lines, 20, 30 years ago, everybody looked down their nose at, engineered flooring.
Right.
That's what you had pecan plywood flooring and, the relatively cheap New York City high rises, pecan flooring.
Right.
Now, my opinion is that you'd be crazy not to use engineered flooring or, non-solid material. Am I crazy on that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I like there's 2 different direct. I mean, so let's imagine the wood is always going to expand and contract, whether we mount it to a substrate inside its own plank. So engineered meaning there's 2 different types of so you have an engineered that would be let's call it a 2-ply engineered, where you have a veneer and they call them lumellus sometimes when they're a little thicker, and I think it's a European. But so imagine a thick veneer, 3/16 of an inch, and they glue that to a plywood backer. Then they mill that into a plank, and then that's your hardwood floor. That's one. There's issues with that, but then the other one is a 3-ply engineered, which is what, if you're going to do an engineered floor, I highly recommend. And there's a guy up in Nyack that does it, Dan Risen at Virtue. It's excellent. But they'll take the top layer, and let's imagine that's a 1/4 inch or 3/16 of oak. They'll put a 3/16 oak on the bottom of the board as well. And the reason they do that, so we'll jump back to our first, again, this is real confusing, but we'll jump back to our first plank, which is just veneer on plywood. The wood is going to shrink. The plywood is not going to shrink because they have, every layer is striated perpendicular to each other, and that's what it's made to do. So while the plywood will restrain that wood for a while, there's a moment when the top is still going to shrink because it's not immune to the moisture change. So that board's going to shrink. What'll happen is you'll get something in the winter called dry cupping, where the board it'll actually still shrink, but it'll pick up the edges of the plank. So it'll shrink, and then it'll pick up the edges, and you'll see this cupping in the wintertime, which used to be cupping always was, hey, you got a damp basement, you've got a leak, you've got something. But now with engineered flooring, sometimes it's the dry cupping. When you have that same layer or on the bottom, and that plank is balanced, that bottom shrinks as well, and it basically counteracts the shrinkage of the top layer. So it keeps it flat. They're still going to shrink, but they'll shrink probably 70% less. But again, what happens in a really wide plank, you run the risk of that top is still going to shrink, and it's restrained. It's going to pick up the edges of the boards, and it's going to find the weakest point. And you might get some checking, or you might get a crack down the center of the board where it actually lifts up the edges of the boards until the point when the wood splits in half, and then it lays back down. And we've had that happen. We had that happen on a job where radiant heat, 12-inch planks, and it was fine everywhere. It was lifting a little bit. This is when we used to do a 2-ply engineered. And we had this great idea. We're going to put 3/8 plywood on, or 3/8 wood. Like, why are they doing all these thin? Back in the day, engineered flooring was almost a true veneer on a piece of plywood. And you're like, that's junk. And then we said, well, we're going to use this big, heavy face, a 3/8 face on plywood. Well, what you end up doing is you give that wood too much strength, and it overpowers the plywood. So what ended up happening is the people were moving in. It's the wintertime. They set their refrigerator down on the floor in the box, and that no moisture could get, it was only getting baked out, and no moisture could get back into that floor, and it split the boards that were under this box, because the radiant is baking it out. You have your floor right on your heating element, it's baking all the moisture out. There's no opportunity for like the relative humidity in the air to reinfuse that floor under the box. So it had 3 boards that had split down the.
But that was still your fault, right? You had to fix it.
Oh yeah, no, and it was our fault. I mean, we did fix it. We fixed everything. I mean, we gotta. I mean, it's impossible to. I mean, I it's one of those things. It's like, hopefully it's a team fixing things, but we're always the guy, right? It's like,
yeah.
Not my fault, but it's my problem thing.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could you give us an idea of what the price differential would be between like a standard wood and a 2-ply and a 3-ply?
Oh yeah, and again, I guess I would say that one more thing about like the different types of wood. I am a fan of solid wood. I mean, so you basically have a floor. There's a company called I think they're out of Denmark, Denison, and they just bring in these giant planks, and they give you, just like the washers, like, hey, we want you to basically put space in between these floors, because they're huge old planks, and you basically see those planks as like it's an individual design element. It's one element instead of a overall floor. You see these great. So it's read differently. So I do love the idea of a solid wood floor whenever possible, because because it'll shrink, but we know that's what wood does. So what you're seeing now is I just wanted to say that, but so what you're seeing now in prices, it all depends. It used to be that the engineered was a lot cheaper. But now, for example, if you're doing a really wide walnut floor, the manufacturer can cut out of 1-inch material. He can cut, instead of 1 plank, he can cut 4 faces. So they're able to run that through the resaw, make 4 faces, and stick it to a plywood backer. And then they say, hey, we've got engineered. And I would say a 2-ply engineered, when you stay narrow, say a rift and quarter white oak. If you're in the 4-inch range, I'm okay with a 2-ply engineered. The back balancing layer, I don't know if it's really required, because once you put the back balancing layer on there, you're adding substantial cost. But that's the best system. And usually the center core is a perpendicular piece of solid wood or plywood. And so plywood works until it doesn't work. And we've had plywood issues in the past as well, where when you do everything right and you're like, we've got this, and then some plywood that has not been made properly, a Baltic birch, somebody in Russia asleep at the wheel, or an engineer like, that's too much glue, because that's probably all their cost in a plywood manufacturing company is the glue. Like, turn it down, it's still sticking. So you always run that danger. So with a solid wood floor, you just never have any of that danger. You don't have an adhesion problem with the glues. You don't have to worry about what happened in the plywood. We don't have to. So there's some benefits there. I would say price wise, your cheapest material always is a 2-ply engineered, because it's easy to do. When you add that other layer, the bottom layer, the balancing layer, is when you start to add costs, because now you have to glue it up twice. You have more real material than just plywood.
Right.
And then again, it depends on the product. So a solid and the engineered come in about the same. The 3-ply usually, I would say, are 25% more for a 3-ply product, and not a lot of guys do it, but it's a really nice product. And it's just like if you put veneer on a piece of plywood, they always veneer the back. It's like finishing a cabinet. You finish the outside, they finish the inside as well. And it's amazing how much even a veneer can move a piece of plywood. So there's a lot of strength in those things.
It's interesting too how many people might see that at first glance and think, why are they finishing the back? No one sees it, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So we did that on one, and we don't always finish our backs, because usually you're throwing the back into a layer of glue. So with a hardwood floor, we almost, we'll finish it once in a while. We actually finished one, and I don't know the whole reason. It was a hardwood or a radiant floor, and the heating guy said that if the back of the floors were black, that it would grab more heat. That was interesting. I don't know, right? Would it?
Don't say you don't know. It's complete BS.
I think I know. I think I know. But I just, let's just go with that. I don't know. That's, you know what, I just just keep your head down. But yeah. So I would say yeah, I do. I feel like I did know.
So speaking of glue,
yeah.
Is there a board thickness as it goes from large to small where you stop gluing it down and only nail it, or do you glue everything?
Well, okay, so the NWFA, the National Wood Flooring Association, is basically 5 and wider. You should glue. Glue is, I always think, it's if you have the opportunity to glue, you should always glue. Something that's 2 1/4. We don't do any 2 1/4. We haven't done a 2 1/4 was the standard. Basically, every 2 1/4 oak. I would never glue that.
Standard right here, by the way.
Right. Yeah, there's it. Yeah, good. Yeah, so that would never be glued, because it just doesn't move enough. The nails are to hold it down. But anything over probably 4 inch, we typically glue. Sometimes we'll do different, depending on what we want the glue to do. When you full trowel a floor, you're basically creating a vapor barrier, and then you're laying your wood into that vapor barrier, and that's always beneficial. So that's why most of the time we don't finish the backs of our floors. Not to mention, you always worry, are we finishing that back of that board with something compatible with that glue? That glue is made to grab the bare wood, and so we hit it with, and I would think it would be a shellac or some kind of material that would be easy for the glue to grab. But are we filling the pores? Are we creating a problem for ourselves? And so usually we just stick with the normal. Glue.
This is where I love to jump into the building science of this entire assembly, because I like the fact that, if you're covering the entire floor with glue, you're kind of air sealed and vapor barriered your entire floor. But with a narrow board floor, like a 2 1/4, no glue. But a lot of people use building paper constantly, right? Which is kind of the same. And I personally believe that we have lost sort of the understanding of the importance of that. I'm a believer that it's important to, whatever air you have in a room, keep it there, except for when you know you want to move it around. So gluing the entire floor down is helping with that. Papering the entire floor is helping with that. But half and half, a little bit of glue and some spaces, you're not. Now all of a sudden you can get breezes between floors and spaces and all kinds of things.
What have you heard is the reason they would use tar paper on hardwood floors?
Oh, tar
I've heard
paper?
like, I've heard like 10 urban myths. Like I have all kinds of them. So,
I wrote a whole article on this. So hopefully I can remember the reasoning. My thoughts at the time I wrote that article were that it was put in as an air barrier because, when wood flooring was started being installed in basically any building,
right.
Things were very breezy between spaces. And the reason we use building paper in almost any place in a building is to stop an airflow between
It's a draft stop.
areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. However, because of what you told me one day, John, I started to question that. It's a great productivity enhancer. In other words, you lay some cheap paper down, and it used to just be cheap newspaper. You can slide your flooring around
Mm-hmm.
very easily, and you can then install the floor much faster.
Yeah, it's quite a bit faster. I think it, and the guys are like, oh, you got to use the 30-pound felt, and we're like, why are we using? And every time you overlap it, it's just like a hump in the floor. So 15-pound, but yeah, we can move them around quite quick. And our guys back in the day, I don't really. I mean, I'll get out there once in a while. I don't. But we used to wear skateboard shoes too. They had some grip on the bottom, so you could really grab the boards and move them in. So we wear these skateboard shoes, you could really go. So it's funny. But yeah, they slide around great, and the floor stays clean. It's not a dusty environment. You staple down. You can chalk lines. You can really see your lines. So
it's not at all clear to me, which is the chicken and which is the egg there.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've heard 100 different, like, oh, it stops squeaks. Well, how does it stop squeaks?
No, it doesn't stop any squeaks.
Yeah, it's stop squeaks. It's just so that when you sweep the floor, the dust doesn't fall on the people in the basement. I mean, you hear all kinds of dumb stuff, and you're like, okay, come on, all right, whatever. But it's got to be a draft. It's got to be drafts. It's got to.
I think because if you look at the history. Paper used to be expensive, so nobody would have ever used it for that purpose. But then all of a sudden, paper got cheap.
Yeah.
And there's reason to believe that they started using it for that purpose. And my guess is they realized, like, wow, this really increased our productivity too.
Yeah.
And boom, it just took off.
Yes.
So, but I don't really know is the truth of the matter.
Yeah, no, and you see back in the 70s, I think they got like 25 cents a foot or 20 cents a foot to lay flooring, and that's when they used to run. They'd finish a finish nail, set that nail with the point of the next nail, and then you watch those guys do that. It was just incredible. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, we're so spoiled with these air assisted. I don't like the air assisted. I never really switched over to the air. I don't like them. I just because you learn how to use the old school power nailers, and I don't know. I like the old ones.
So what is polymerized tung oil, and is it really special, or is it just a marketing gimmick?
Well, I think the idea of it is that it's been heated, right? They polymerized, and so it's been heated. It's almost like a boiled linseed oil. And I think what it does, it changes the chemical composition where it'll dry. If you've ever used just regular raw linseed oil, it doesn't dry. It doesn't want to dry. So when they boil it actually does something to the composition of the material or the composition of the linseed oil that it'll actually dry. So
for the listening audience, by the way, tung oil is it's from a plant, the tung tree, I think it's called.
No, isn't it a bee? I thought it was a beetle. There's that. That's the shellac. Shellac. You're right. It's a tongue. It's a nut, isn't it? It's like
something like that. But anyway, it's a finishing oil that you can use as either with or without a stain, and it's a penetrating oil, penetrates into the wood as a finish, and it over a period of time, which I would have said was usually like a few days or a week or a month even, it does get hard, and it can be a hard finish. But it's not like a surface finish like polyurethane. It's in the wood. So, and if you it's my memory is it was you put one coat per day for a week, one coat a week for a month, and one coat a month for a year. But after every coat, you have to wipe off the excess and then buff it very diligently and very energetically, and it comes out
Right.
like beautifully shiny. Do I have that about right?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I so then you move in. So that's what we should tell you. Then you move in after a year. So, but yeah. So that's kind of what's happening now. There's been there's a product called Rubio Monocoat, and it's a linseed oil based product. And so there's been kind of a resurgence of or revisit to that oil product because it's beautiful. I mean, there would be nothing as beautiful. And even when, obviously furniture, the Danish oils, which are tung oil based and linseed oil based. And a lot of those finishes are just so beautiful because you're looking at the wood. So what you would do, for example, when we do our floors, we'll prepare our floors, we'll sand them to, fine, and then we'll wipe them with water. And the reason we wipe them with water is so that the grain opens up. Sometimes when you sand something too fine, you wipe oil on it and it wipes almost off again because all the grain is closed because you sanded it so fine. So you either need to rough it with 100 screen or you want to just hit it with water. And if you notice a piece of wood that's sanded really fine and you put water on it, it almost gets very hairy. You can feel it gets rough again. So they call it water popping, where it pops that grain and opens it up. And so they'll do that before you stain dark, because then it'll take the stain more evenly and more deeply. And they'll also do that with oils too. So you get that. Your goal is to get the oil into the wood, and you're walking on the surface of of wood, not a poly or a urethane piece of plastic. You're actually walking on the wood, and that wood is saturated with an oil that's much softer than a traditional, polyurethane or a urethane or acrylic finish.
Is that your favorite finish?
I want it at my house.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yes, I love it. What was that? What did you say?
Great. We'll install this in my house, right?
Yes,
I'll just talk to my husband. We'll make this happen.
Well, I mean, it goes pretty quick. I mean, so it's basically the new ones they actually mix them with isocyanate hardeners. So they use a isocyanate hardener with these oils to help them dry faster, and actually gives them some durability. So you can buy them at Tractor Supply. They make an enamel hardener. So when you're painting your tractor, so you can just start banging it into cows and trees and things, and it won't scratch. So it basically increases the hardness, and it actually and decreases the dry time of the material. So they're actually mixing those with these linseed oil products. And they're getting pretty good results. It's not the most durable. I have it in my bedroom. I have the Rubio because it doesn't run you out of the house. It's linseed oil based, so you could breathe it. You could all drink it, but it's not the most durable product. You couldn't drink the isocyanate hardener, just even you could tell by the name of it.
I hear that it cures coronavirus.
It does. It does. Absolutely. Yep. Yes. I'd like to, I hope one guy tries that soon. I would love to see that guy try that. We need just one guy to do that. And so anyway,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to wrap this up. We've been talking about an hour, which I think is probably long enough.
Okay.
John, thank you. And so, why don't you, the name of your company is Yarema, right? I mean, I'm not crazy on that. If people need to get a hold of you.
Yarema. Yep.
So,
we're pretty easy to find. Yep.
And I'm not crazy. You work anywhere in the world, correct?
Yeah. Yep. We just got
really.
We just got back from Malta. We have one coming up. Looks like I mean, we've done some initial in Peru, and we get to look around a little bit. So most of our work is in New York, but I'm based out of Michigan. But yeah, we're looking at one in San Francisco, Denver. So we go wherever the right project is. It's always, you just have to,
Very cool. Beautiful work, by the way.
Thank you.
Beautiful
very
work.
much.
I would recommend everybody to go check out your website and buy your book if it's available. I have no idea, but
we're out. We're out. We got to print again. But yes, soon we will. We're actually.
I want to get your book. Where do you usually sell it? On Amazon?
No, well, we had it on Amazon, but we
Sorry if that
ran
was blasphemy.
No,
I don't know.
What?
When we talk about Amazon, we'll joke that that Jeff is delivering it, or
Yeah.
Jeff's got another delivery for us. Peace be upon him.
Right. Well,
We're big
now,
fans.
yeah, I'm a big fan right now. I gotta say, yeah, no, right now we're out, but we're gonna start. Probably we'll go back to print in a couple months. It'll go out this summer, but yeah. And you can
it's
see most of
beautiful.
our stuff is on our website too. You can go out to our website.
Yarema, spelled Yarema.
Yes, John,
For
and
people
our
who can't see
website
it.
is johnyarema.com, or if you put my name in Google, it'll pull up a whole bunch of pictures of floors. So